Hello and welcome to this, a video about the released cards so far, or at least the previewed cards, from the Karazhan adventure. It has been confirmed, it is 100% being Karazhan. I don't know if any of you guys watched the Friday stream, which I personally didn't, but it was at a weird time I think in EU. But basically, wow, the new cards they've released, or previewed, like I said, are really interesting. So let's get straight to it. They've so far released, starting off with Enchanted Raven for Druid. This is a 1-mana 2/2 beast, and quite possibly this is a really hyped card for me because I predicted a 1-mana beast card for Druid in my prediction video. I don't know if you guys have seen that, but feel free to go back and watch it if you want to. I did make some mistakes in that video, but basically I did predict a 1-mana beast card simply because it would fit the curve of Beast Druid, of going 1-mana beast card straight into Mark of Usage, and then into either Raptor or Druid of the Flame, and then from then on into your 4-drops and 5-drops. So that's super cool. I got a prediction right, yay! But basically what's important about this card, actually about this card this time, is that this is a really solid 1-drop stat-wise. It's 2/2, and that contests most 1-drops and most 2-drops, and even some 3-drops. So what this means is that Druid as a class has never had this, really. You could argue that Living Roots is okay as a 1-drop, and it certainly is. It definitely encapsulates the whole choose one thematic aspect of the Druid class really well. But this by itself is just so much better in Beast Druid. It's an actual beast, which means you don't have to wait until turn 4 to play like a beast 2-drop and then use Mark of Usage. You can just on curve buff a minion. And once it's traded, it might be like a 4 attack with 2 health left, but that's still so strong, and you drew a card as well. So this is a really big deal for aggressive Druid builds using the Beast archetype, and I'm honestly super excited. It's just a really solid card. It's basically just what Beast Druid needed, and I personally can't wait to test it out. In the past I have tried Stone Tusk Boar in Beast Druid simply because the 1-drop is just so important. You really do want to get that 1-drop into Mark of Usage. It's just super killer if you can get it. And this is such a good card by itself, but coupled with Mark of Usage is just busted, in my opinion. I might be wrong, but that's what I think about Enchanted Raven. So onto what's it called? Kindly Grandmother for Hunter. This is a 2-mana 1/1 with Death Rattle. Summon a 3/2 big bad wolf, and the first body is a beast as well as the second body from the Death Rattle, as you would expect, it being a wolf and all. So what this means is that Hunter did actually kind of need a 2-drop. I didn't mention this in my predictions video simply because I didn't believe that Blizzard would actually give them a 2-drop. Seeing as they already have King's Elec, they already can use Huge Toad from the neutral range of minions. That's a really solid 2-drop. There's also some experimentation with Doomsayer when Whispers of the Old Gods came out. But this card is just really solid, to be honest. Obviously the first body is really bad for a 2-drop, it's a 1/1, of course it is. But overall, stat-wise, the 3/2 plus the 1/1 make it a 2-mana 4/3 with the beast tag attached. That's just nuts in a vacuum. Obviously it's fairly slow because you have to kill off the first body before it can take advantage of the increased stats off of the second body, but even so, it's a really good card for a slightly slower mid-range build. In comparison to King's Elec, which is an immediately faster card because it's a bigger body to start with, but has a slower dex effect of drawing your heavier minions if you have heavier minions in your deck. This card actually is the reverse of that. It's slower to begin with when you first play it, but then it has like a faster effect. Drawing a heavy card that you can play later on is a much slower effect than getting a 3/2 on basically our next turn. And obviously it being a beast is just expected at this point. Hunter is the premium beast class. This makes Ram Wrangler pretty good It was pretty good before, but I think this might push Ram Wrangler to be a 1 or 2 of. This, plus Infested Wolf, almost guarantees that you have a beast on the board come turn 5. And that is super important because, as well as Ram Wrangler, there's also Houndmaster, which, to be honest, is already a nuts card. I think most mid-range decks are running 2 of the Houndmaster, but now 2 Houndmaster in mid-range Hunter will be guaranteed every single game, if it wasn't already before, and Ram Wrangler will probably see some decent experimentation with. Also, a note I'd like to make about this card, it kind of encourages hunters to run buff cards, because the initial body might not trade into anything, since it's just so weak. So Bestial Wrath might get experimented with, which is pretty cool. I'm pretty excited about that. I don't think I even have that in my collection. Also, on a more serious note, Abusive Sergeant might start getting run in Hunter. Also, cards such as Dark-Iron Dwarf, maybe. Defender of Argus, maybe. But the 4-drop slot for Hunter is quite stacked already, so I think Bestial Wrath or Abusive Sergeant are much more likely to see play. So, onto the Mage card. Firelands Portal. This is 7 mana, deal 5 damage to anything. It can be face, it can be a minion, but also summon a random 5-cost minion. So this is a really cool card actually, because it further pushes Mage down the path that Blizzard have been going for the past few adventures and expansions of more board control, more focus on interacting with the board. Because quite clearly 7 mana for 5 damage is a terrible ratio. Like Fireball does 6 damage and that's 4 mana. So you're paying about half the cost of this card for the 5 damage, and then about the rest of the cost of the card for the 5-cost minion. So all in all, this card is really balanced, is how I would describe it. The problem with this card is that a lot of 5-cost minions are Battlecry minions. So we can take a look at Harrison Jones. You know, it's got the body of a 4-drop, basically. Stampeding Kodo, which also has the body of a 4-drop. And because they have Battle Cries, they essentially have weaker bodies, despite being costing 5 mana. So this is what balances this card. If the 5-drop slot in Hearthstone was full of 5/5s and 5/6s, which it really is not at the moment, this card might be really good. But at the moment I really can't see this card being absolutely busted. However, what I can say about this card is that it's absolutely top dog in a top decking wall, especially as Mage. So if you reach turn 10 and you're both running out of resources, you top deck this card and you can both clear one of their minions, especially coupled with a ping from your hero power, as well as develop your own board, and that's really powerful. And it's just like a really dense card power-wise. It does 2 things at once, and they're both things you typically want to do in like a mid-range deck. However, on curve, it's fairly mediocre. I can see it being run as a one-of in Reno Mage, obviously as a one-of it being Reno, or maybe it might encourage people to try some more mid-rangey tempo builds, slightly slower tempo builds, but maybe not, as it's not absolutely amazing. So, on to Paladin. They've received Ivory Knight, which is a 6 mana 4/4 body, which has the text to discover a spell and restore health equal to the cost of the spell. So, what this means is that this is basically a weaker heal bot for Paladin, as oftentimes you will not draw an 8-cost spell or more, right? Paladin only has Lay on Hands, anything can happen that are expensive spells. So most of the time you can expect to get around 4 health gain from this card, as the Discover mechanic encourages you to pick the heavier spell, but there's also so many cheap spells in Paladin. There's all the 1-cost buff cards. The give your minion Divine Shield, give your minion +3 attack, and then all the secrets, of course, which all counter spells. So Ivory Knight is really interesting in that it kind of pushes a more mid-range type of Paladin. You wouldn't want to run in a mid-range Paladin list Forbidden Healing, because it does nothing on the board. Healing is all well and good, especially healing for 20, but a mid-range list will often be on par on the board, and so you really want to be playing something that does many things in one card, such as this card, which gives you a body to play with on the board. It gives you essentially a draw effect, and it also heals you for some amount of health. So the fact that this card does many things pushes a more mid-range type of Paladin list to use this, and the fact that anything can happen actually exists in Paladin kind of encourages a more Murloc themed Paladin build, possibly running War Leader, Valfin Inquisitor, Murloc Knight plus some minion buffs. I believe that Strifecrow experimented with this kind of build when Whispers of the Old Gods first came out, but it didn't end up working for a number of reasons. It's been a while since I watched those videos, but basically this card could encourage people to run a Murloc-y mid-range Paladin, is what I believe, maybe. As if you play this card and you discover anything can happen, you basically can add to your deck another anything and rebuild your board really easily, as well as heal for 10. Whereas if you don't run the Murlocs, you'll never choose the anything can happen spell unless you're that desperate for the heal, and therefore won't get the full use of this card as a Murloc mid-range build would. So yeah, a really interesting card, pushing Paladin further down the mid-range route, whereas recently it's been a much more control-y, slow class with the N'Zoth builds. On to Rogue. They have been teased Ethereal Peddler, which is a 5-mana 5/6 card that reduces the cost of any cards in your hand that are from other classes by 2. So what this means is that this card encourages a rogue list that would use it to run Burgle and Undercity Huckster, as both of these cards draw cards from your opponent's class, and that's the synergy between these 3 cards. So what kind of rogue list would run this card? First off, it's obviously a slower card, as Undercity Huckster is quite a slow card in itself. It has a Death Rattle draw effect, which is quite slow despite it being a 2-drop, and Burgle is quite obviously a poor man's Thoughtsteal, and Thoughtsteal isn't even that great at the moment anyway. So it's a really good card. Like, 5-mana 5/6 is a great body, and it has an effect attached to it, a beneficial effect attached to it. So it's a really good card in a vacuum, but it encourages you to run kind of subpar cards along with it in order to take advantage of its effect. And that's kind of where this card gets interesting, because the only deck I can think of for Rogue that would run this card maybe would be a Reno Death Rattle Rogue, as then you're already running in that list Undercity Huckster, like, because it's a solid Rogue Death Rattle card, right? And so alongside this, all you'd have to do is find room for a Burgle and the Ethereal Peddler, and suddenly you have a really good 5-drop, and you've also gained a little extra flexibility and draw in your deck. So that's where I think this would make the most sense, but it's honestly a really interesting card, and I can see where Blizzard was going with this. It's further pushing Rogue to focus less on combos and drawing with Gadgetzan, and more on interacting with the board and playing a slower kind of game plan, which is kind of cool, since Rogue currently doesn't do this much. So onto the neutral cards, we got 2 legendaries teased. The first one is Barnes, which is a 4-mana 3/4, summon a random card from your deck as a 1/1. So obviously this card, it's only going to be good with Death Rattle lists, or a list that might run lots of cards with end of turn effects, as you get a really weak body from the Battle Cry, but when that body dies, you get the complete Death Rattle effect. So let's take an extreme example of this. You could use Barnes, the Battle Cry triggers, and you summon a Chillmaw, and that gives you essentially a 4-mana 3 damage clear on the board. So yeah, that's where it makes the most sense. It's definitely got synergy with a Death Rattle list. I think it's good, but I think we'll have to wait and see. I think it will be run in most control N'Zoth lists, Death Rattle lists. Yeah, I don't know, it's really interesting. I really like this card actually. The more I think about it, the more niche it seems. But what's also cool is that it's a 4-drop, and so in the most common N'Zoth list at the moment, N'Zoth Paladin, you're already kind of squeezing out loads of 4-drops in your list. You've got 2 True Silvers, you've got 2 Consecrations. The list is really tight in the Zoth Paladin, and so this kind of encourages some flexible deck building. So yeah, basically it just has huge synergy with any N'Zoth list, and yeah, it's pretty cool. On to the next legendary, and the last card that they've previewed so far. This is a 7 mana 4/6 mech with Taunt, the Curator. It has a battle cry, draw a beast, a dragon, and a murloc from your deck. So this is clearly nuts. It's got a reasonable body for its stat cost, and considering the fact that it has Taunt and a hugely beneficial battle cry, the body is fine, the cost is fine, it's probably very balanced in that aspect. But in the right deck, this is a 7 mana card with decent body that draws you 3 cards. Like, sure, you might be thinking, what deck on earth could possibly run a beast, a dragon, and a murloc? And probably 2 of each of those to increase consistency. And yeah, I would agree with you. It makes no sense at the moment, but this card is good enough to make decks run a beast, a dragon, and a murloc. Like, it's that good. It just, drawing 3 cards is nuts. In the right deck, this card will be absolutely broken. This card is really good. I cannot wait to see what the community does with a deck that has a beast, a dragon, and a murloc in. Presumably, since you're drawing so many cards, it would either be a combo or a mid-range kind of pressuring style of deck. So, yeah, this card is probably the most exciting card of the entire set. Well, not the entire set, but of this adventure so far. It's so cool. The design is so interesting. Yeah, I don't know what else to say, honestly. This is a really cool card. I'm so hyped for experimenting with this. These are just my initial impressions, but wow. Wow. This has been a pretty hype first set of cards to be previewed. I'm just looking at all the images and I'm just like, wow. Yes, so in summary, lots of cool cards, lots of cool concepts being played with here, synergies being pushed, themes from previous expansions being further pushed, and new directions, I'm looking at you, Curator, definitely being pushed. So yeah, pretty hype, cannot wait for the next few previews from Blizzard. I am so stoked to see what else they've got cooking.